Alan Watts discovered that the majority of his most troubling encounters with human behavior revealed a single repeating warning sign before people turned destructive. This psychological red flag often appears in individuals who, on the surface, seem completely ordinary, charming, and harmless. Yet once recognized, Watts emphasized that the only true protection is immediate withdrawal. The reason it is so dangerous is precisely because it does not announce itself through open aggression or obvious toxic patterns. It is subtle, disguised beneath civility, and therefore even more lethal in its effect. The sign that Watts identified becomes visible when a person begins to project their unacknowledged shadow onto others with absolute certainty. And here is the crucial point that many fail to grasp. This is not simply an abstract psychological idea. It is a real-world warning system that can save your life. Watts once described a case that reshaped his entire understanding of human danger. The person involved was articulate, intelligent, and appeared genuinely compassionate. But there was something chilling in the way they spoke. Every figure they described as manipulative or evil seemed to share the exact traits Watts recognized as belonging to the speaker themselves, traits that had been denied and pushed out of awareness. This was not a case of mistaken judgment. It was a systematic, unconscious projection of their own shadow onto everyone around them. Within a matter of months, this individual destroyed close relationships, ended careers of colleagues, and even drove a family member to collapse, all while believing completely in their innocence and imagining themselves to be the victim. Watts realized he was not looking at a misunderstanding or simple conflict. He was observing one of the most dangerous mechanisms in human interaction: unconscious shadow projection fused with absolute conviction. Modern neuroscience has since confirmed the terrifying element in this pattern. When someone projects their shadow with certainty, their brain literally rewrites reality to sustain those distorted perceptions. Research shows that during such episodes, the same neural networks light up as in full-blown delusional states. The person is not consciously lying. Their brain has altered their perception. That is why people caught in a projection are so persuasive. They sincerely believe the distortions they spread. Even more troubling, their conviction creates what psychologists call fields of distorted reality. These people do not merely misperceive you, they pull others into seeing you through their lens. Watts observed case after case in which entire reputations, relationships, and social networks collapsed under the weight of one person's projections, delivered with unshakable certainty. If you have ever been accused of intentions you never had, emotions you never felt, or motives that never crossed your mind, and if those accusations were delivered with unwavering confidence, immune to evidence, then you have already faced shadow projection firsthand. What makes it so insidious is that the more someone projects, the more convinced they become. It becomes a feedback loop strong enough to ensnare entire families, workplaces, and even communities. Ancient wisdom traditions hinted at this long before Watts articulated it in psychological terms. Buddhist teachings describe the clouded mirror that reflects one's impurities onto others. Christianity warns of focusing on the speck in another's eye while ignoring the beam in one's own. Watts carried this further, showing how projectors do not simply misperceive. They generate entire alternate realities, realities that can begin to feel real not only to them, but also to those around them. The most telling warning sign is when there is a complete mismatch between how someone describes you and your actual inner experience. They ascribe to you thoughts and intentions that do not exist in your consciousness, and they do so with such conviction that you begin doubting your own reality. This is gaslighting at its most sophisticated level, not deliberate manipulation, but unconscious distortion, powerful enough to break another's sense of self. The greater danger lies in how projectors unconsciously recruit others into their vision. Watts referred to this as a form of collective possession. When entire groups adopt one person's projections, the danger multiplies. Psychological research explains that when people are confronted with someone's absolute certainty, they feel pressure to align with it, even against their own observations. This is how families turn against a scapegoated member, workplaces rally to ostracize an innocent colleague, and communities target individuals based on accusations with no foundation in reality. The projector becomes the eye of a storm, drawing others into their unconscious conflict. Watts noticed a predictable set of warning signs that signaled dangerous. If these reflections are offering you a moment of clarity or calm, I warmly invite you to support Listening Mind by subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Each gesture of support helps us continue creating meaningful content and allows this community of thoughtful listeners to grow. Projection. First is absolute certainty about the inner world of others. They insist on knowing your motives better than you do yourself. Second is their immunity to evidence. Nothing you say can alter their belief, and every denial is twisted as proof of guilt. Third is the disproportionate emotional intensity they display. An exaggerated anger or fear unsupported by the actual situation. Fourth is the recurring narrative in which they always appear as the innocent victim of others' cruelty. And fifth, their attempt to recruit others, subtly or openly, into sharing their distorted perspective of you. When these five appear together, you are not facing a misunderstanding, but an unconscious mechanism that can escalate until it destroys reputations, relationships, or even sanity. Watts also spoke of other dangerous signs beyond projection. One of them is ego inflation. Unlike unconscious projectors, inflated individuals are convinced of their righteousness while completely blind to their shadow. They identify with archetypal roles far beyond their capacity to embody the savior, the wise sage, the righteous judge. They may appear enlightened, morally superior, or spiritually advanced, which makes them even more dangerous because others willingly surrender to their apparent authority. Yet behind their charisma is rigidity, certainty without humility, and an inability to tolerate disagreement. Watts warned that such people eventually collapse under the tension of identifying their small ego with vast archetypal forces, but before they collapse, they can cause extraordinary damage. Another perilous state is total identification with the social persona, the mask one wears in public. The so-called perfect person becomes a prisoner of their own image. Outwardly flawless, always appropriate, and endlessly polite, such people hide a terrifying emptiness. Their shadow, unacknowledged and sealed away, accumulates like pressure in a closed container. And when it finally erupts, the explosion is chaotic and destructive. The more perfect the persona, Watts said, the more devastating the shadow's return. Perhaps most frightening of all is archetypal possession. This occurs when someone loses their individual identity and becomes a vessel for transpersonal energies. Their voice, their eyes, even their presence seem taken over by something ancient and impersonal. They may embody the eternal victim, the cosmic warrior, or the divine parent. They radiate purpose and certainty, and this makes them persuasive, but also profoundly dangerous. Archetypes contain both light and dark poles. The savior can easily become the fanatic. Watts observed that those possessed by such forces often behave in ways entirely contrary to their conscious values, sometimes with no memory of their actions afterward. Finally, Watts described the compulsion to repeat, when people unconsciously recreate the same painful situations again and again, always casting themselves as the victim of cruel fate. Though it may seem less dramatic than the other signs, it is dangerous because such people inevitably recruit others into their unresolved dramas. Without realizing it, you may be pulled into playing the role of betrayer, abandoner, or persecutor in a story that long predates your involvement. The tragic irony is that their unconscious patterns orchestrate encounters to keep their suffering alive. So what is the protection? Watts insisted it lies in conscious awareness combined with clear boundaries. Trust your inner sense of reality when another's description of you does not align with your experience. Do not waste energy trying to convince those who cannot be convinced. The attempt only strengthens their projections. Share as little personal information as possible, for it will be twisted to support their view. Keep records when necessary, because such people often rewrite history. Seek perspective from those outside the distortion field. And when multiple signs appear, remember that withdrawal may be the only safe option. Watts's ultimate realization was that projection and these other patterns are not random. They are ways the unconscious avoids the terrifying task of self-acceptance. The patient who spread destruction while imagining himself innocent could not bear to acknowledge his own capacity for cruelty, manipulation, and selfishness. By projecting those qualities outward, he kept his self-image pure while unconsciously enacting the very behaviors he condemned. This is the tragic irony. People often become what they most fear or hate, all while remaining blind to the transformation. The danger, therefore, lies not only in others, but also in ourselves, in our own refusal to accept the shadow. But awareness breaks the spell. Once you recognize projection, inflation, persona identification, possession, and repetition compulsions, both in others and within, you step outside their jurisdiction. The most dangerous people are those unconscious of their own darkness, armed with conviction in their distorted perceptions. When you meet such individuals, remember Watts's insight. The most terrifying task is to accept oneself fully. Those who cannot accept themselves will inevitably cast their disowned qualities onto you. The only shield is awareness, the clarity to know what belongs to you and what does not. That awareness frees you from the gravitational pull of their unconscious forces and allows you to live outside the storms of distortion that consume so many lives. Thank you sincerely for sharing your time with Listening Mind. Your presence here means more than you can imagine. If today's video has brought you value, a subscription and a like are a wonderful way to help us continue on this journey of reflection and empathy together. From the heart, thank you for being part of this space.